go. So yeah, I wanted to talk about kind of software versus web and that sort of stuff today. A little bit about me. I'm a development lead at a company called Rayloop. And what does that kind of mean? I mean, I do some software development stuff. I have for 12 odd years now. And I built various things in kind of PHP as my main kind of software engineering language there, a bit of JavaScript stuff. And then over the last several years as well, I've kind of refocused into more of that web side of things, and sometimes doing software engineering and kind of web development and that sort of stuff as well, but kind of a bit of a blend of the two. At Rayloop, we have a software team and a web team. So as a development lead, I'm overseeing kind of both teams, making sure kind of what we're doing is coherent and everything as well. So I thought there's a lot of learning that I do as part of my role, and I thought I'd try to put some of the stuff that I'm teaching my team and showing my team stuff that, I'll get it into a talk and kind of go through stuff. Quick thing about Rayloop, we're a digital product studio, so we do websites, web apps, and mobile apps. That's kind of our bread and butter. So we have like a software team and a web team that primarily do stuff. There's a couple of examples. I don't know if anyone's tried the Try Dry January app. That's one of our biggest projects that we've kind of worked on. Helping reduce alcohol consumption and stuff kind of every January. That's kind of a big one. That's kind of a little bit about me. I guess some of the stuff that I want to talk about today, I want to dive into what I actually mean by software, because it means something different to a lot of different people. And I'll go over kind of what I mean when I'm talking about in this kind of context. Again, what I mean by web, what sort of stuff I'm building and kind of working on and that sort of stuff as well. Sometimes you can also have like software on the web, which adds some extra complexity. So I'll kind of touch on that a little bit as well. And dive into, what sets them apart, what they can kind of learn about, each other as well. If you're doing software stuff but happen to build a website every now and then, what can you apply to that, or vice versa? If you're a web developer and trying to get more into software stuff, what can you learn? A lot of this is kind of based on my own experience and the stuff that I kind of do at Rayloop. It's not going to be super exhaustive for a half-an-hour talk. I'm not going to be able to jargon bust everything. So if you've got any questions or want me to dive into any particular thing a bit more, ask me at the end or at the pub afterwards. That's all good. What do I mean by kind of software? It's things like platforms, dashboards, workflow systems, APIs, those sorts of things. These are things that are typically kind of like, locked behind a login. They're for companies that, are doing particular kind of workflow system that, managing customer databases and that sort of stuff. So slight generalization, but I quite like this separation where this type of software is typically about saving money in an organization. So it's not something that's, yes, you can have some software systems that are revenue generating, but typically, software is generally about kind of saving money in some form. For example, this is kind of one of the software things we built a few years ago. This is for toilet twinning. I don't know if anyone's seen those little posters in the bathrooms about twinning toilets. We built kind of the website and the API and the backend system for this. So this is what the staff use at toilet twinning to log in, manage orders and that sort of stuff. So like order management system. There's reporting stuff in there. There's packing workflows and actually shipping stuff out. So that's an example of the type of software that I'm talking about. Another one, this is another base of software that we did at Rayloop as well, where it's all about security, reporting and analytics and tracking and that sort of stuff as well. So it flags up any kind of security issues and things like that as well. But again, all kind of behind a login, but it's there to reduce risk and that sort of stuff as well. A third example, this is another project that we worked on, John Charcoal. They're a mortgage broker. And we did a whole bunch of work with them using like SMS platforms and stuff, and saved up to 86% of SMS operating costs and stuff, building a system, integrating it with Pipedrive and all that sort of stuff to help their advisors, give a better service to their customers. So that's kind of a visual kind of example of what I mean by software here. And I guess when we're building with this stuff in mind, I guess who are we building for? Kind of what are we building? What do we kind of need to think about here? When we're building with software, typically you've got a more controlled set of users, you've got a more controlled set of devices, In contrast to the web where it's open to anyone, you've got any sort of device or anything, you typically have, say like there's an office, kind of what machines and stuff they're using, that sort of stuff. Typically there's more of a priority for desktop rather than, where there's more kind of mobile first and everything. There's not always, sometimes mobile and tablet is really important, but a lot of the work that people have been doing on these systems are desktop. They often have really complex business logic and stuff in, and are often really long living. So that's kind of a bit of the context of some of the things we need to think about for software. As for the user, it's great that these systems look good, but actually, they should function over form. They should work before they look good. And I don't know if anyone's inherited some systems before, they often don't look very good. But as long as they work and people can do their job and do what they need to do, that's often sufficient. But what they care about is them being reliable. They care about being able to actually do their job when they need to do it. And if they get held up, that can cause problems, cause delays, and that sort of stuff as well. So they need a lot of flexibility as well. So if they're trying to do particular tasks and things like that, yes, we might have 80% of the time they might be able to do one thing they want to do, but actually, if they need to do something different, something rings up and they need to do something unusual, they should be able to kind of do that in some capacity. An example, the toilet tooling thing that I talked about, typically they'd have people ring up to do orders or use the website to take orders, but occasionally they'll go down and do an event and they'll have a table, people will come over and give cash and they take a certificate away. And then afterwards they'd have to bulk upload, 200, 300, 400 orders. And having the kind of the flexibility in the system to allow them to do that sort of thing, it can be really useful. Recoverable. So again, if they've done something slightly wrong and they, accidentally deleted a customer, can they get that back? If they put an order into the wrong status or done anything like that, it's like how much can they do on their own before they need to kind of speak to a developer, speak to the agency to kind of do some work to kind of fix it, So kind of this flexibility and recoverable is kind of intertwined a little bit, but I find those are generally, the needs of users when they're using these software systems. And I guess in terms of the client needs now, I guess I'm using client here. Sometimes the client is you or your organization as well. But we're an agency, we tend to deal with clients. Cost is probably a big one. They want things to be cost efficient, not just kind of when you're building it, but also we talked about things being long living. And when you're working on a project over time, you want them to, the client wants that to continue to be cost effective. The more technical debt that you add to a project or that gets added to a project through sometimes bad decisions by the client, the more it takes to do future work. It's like, actually, this system is legacy now. It's going to take me twice as long as if it was in my nice, shiny new Laravel thing. It needs to be kind of low risk. So if it is very kind of business critical, if it goes down for 10 minutes, is it going to cost them hundreds of thousands of pounds? So generally speaking, they want things to be low risk. Not always true, depends on the system. And again, stability is kind of linked to that as well. They want it just to be working all the time and working well. Being able to adapt to business change as well. That's so making sure what you're building is easy to change from a technical perspective, and can adapt to kind of whatever the changes and stuff come in. Some of this is kind of linked to kind of cost efficiency and stuff as well. And security is a big thing. If you're dealing with orders, you've got customer data and that getting breached or leaked is quite scary, and the client doesn't want to deal with that sort of stuff. So security plays a big part in kind of what they're doing. But again, the level that these things matter depend on what you're building and that sort of stuff as well. So I've got some examples here. We talked about kind of web and software. So I've picked kind of just two examples. I build a lot of the web stuff in WordPress, and our software team use Laravel a lot. Yes, you can use Symfony and other stuff as well, but I'm using this as an example. So when we're talking about a lot of the software stuff, it's like Laravel or this sort of framework makes a lot of sense. Sometimes that decision can get a little bit blurred, and there's a little bit of web stuff in here. It's like, okay, and then sometimes there's a lot more web stuff in here. It's like, okay, well, actually, what should we use at this point in time? So I'll touch on that a little bit more later. But yeah, you typically kind of work in this range from, software to web. And yeah, while it's simple to go, oh, I've got an API on this thing, so I'm going to always use Laravel, might not always be useful if there's more web stuff. What do I mean by web? I mean things like brochure websites and e-commerce sites, that sort of thing. And here, web is typically about earning money. Again, not 100% true, but even if it's passively through raising awareness of your brand and things like that as well, putting information out there. So I kind of like that separation where web's typically about earning and software is typically about saving. Again, not always applicable, but it's true quite a lot of the time. So what do I mean about some of the web stuff? Again, I pulled some videos from our case study stuff. I'm sure we've all used websites and stuff before, but responsive and that sort of stuff as well. This sort of thing. Some of this one has a Stripe checkout workflow and all that sort of stuff in for donations. So yeah, when we're building for the web, we're actually building something that's available to everyone, and that to me is the core of the web, and it's surprisingly hard to do well. But it's that kind of mindset of actually we're building for a lot of people here. I mentioned that kind of briefly before. There's unpredictable devices and networks. So you're not in a controlled environment, I guess, like a lot of software stuff is. Now, not all software is controlled, but people could be on trains and that sort of stuff as well, on random devices that you never heard of, made from China. And yeah, you still want your website to kind of be available in some form. We also have to worry about search engines. That's something you typically don't need to worry about for software, but yeah, it's quite a big thing when it comes to the web. And typically, the web side of things is mostly kind of logic free from a business's perspective. Yes, there can be bits of business logic and stuff in there, but actually, it's not as prevalent and as complicated as like software stuff, which is generally encoding quite a lot of sweaty business logic. And again, most websites are long living in some form. So yeah, we've already got what we're building is already got different context and different things in mind. The user needs are again different. You want to be able to access information quickly. You need to make it kind of easy to use, and some of this stuff here you need that kind of good information architecture, figuring out a decent sitemap and that sort of stuff as well. Good user experience, performance, that sort of stuff to allow them to access this stuff quickly. You need to make sure it's reliable. Not just kind of it being up all the time, but also making sure that things aren't changing so much that it doesn't work half the time, or there's bugs or that sort of stuff as well. An unreliable website really erodes trust quickly with a brand, and yeah, that can be a really big thing for clients which care about brand representation. That's yes, it could be a source of revenue, but actually most websites, outside of just informational kind of pieces, represent brands in some way. So you want to make sure you're not eroding trust or anything like that, and you're representing them well. You want to make sure their information is available. Again, we're building for everyone, so make it available to as many people as possible. Cost efficiency, again, we're talking about clients here. So of course there's cost efficiency here. Low risk. This is sometimes useful, sometimes not. So for some clients, their website going down could cost them lots of money. Other people, if a tree falls in a forest, does anyone know? So yeah, it's kind of debatable. And then the other big thing is kind of making sure this content is editable and really easily editable. So typically for these sorts of things, you're doing it in WordPress, but there could be a bit more business logic, a bit more complex stuff in here. And, it could get a bit blurred on, depending on the type of project. There's half web, half software stuff in it. What do you use? Do you use Laravel and then figure out the web side of things, or do you use WordPress and figure out the software engineering side of things? The other kind of aspect is this idea of software on the web. So an example is this is like a customer portal. So it's still by under the login. You're doing very kind of business centered processes and stuff around, managing policies and payments and all this sort of stuff. But this is available to their customers. So it's still kind of anyone out there using any kind of device, that sort of thing as well. Another example could be, Asana or Jira, that sort of stuff, customer dashboards. And for this sort of stuff, you kind of need resilience, you need the kind of maintainability, you need the security, you need the performance, like all of those kind of customer needs. There's like a bit of a blend of both. I'll touch on that a bit more later. So yeah, for these kind of software on the web projects, you haven't got so much kind of controlled users and devices, tends to be a bit more open. Mobile and tablet often are a lot more priorities, so you've not really got that priority for desktop, but you often have complex business logic like we're doing from software. They're all long living, available to everyone. So this is kind of like software side and like web side here, so it's kind of blending the two together. You've got unpredictable devices and networks. You don't normally need to care about search engine stuff for this, and they're mostly, full of complex kind of business logic and stuff. So you kind of got a bit of a mix from both software and the web, and it depends on the project on what that mix is. User needs from these again, function over form. Form is important because it's now client facing. You've still got that brand representation that's important, but it definitely still needs to be reliable, needs to be flexible, recoverable for the user, so they can do the tasks they need to without having to get in touch with the client. They still need to access the information quickly. The UX is important. You can't just train someone and go, oh, this is how you do it, even if it's a bit rubbish. Like, it needs to be still clear and easy to use. In terms of the client on these things, cost efficiency is always, low risk, stable, and can adapt to business change. Security is a big thing. Again, we're dealing with a lot of important information here, but you still also need brand representation. You don't worry about their information being as available as a website, because often it's still behind a login and that sort of stuff as well. But yeah, still cost efficient. So software kind of on the web is typically harder because you're having to blend these two things together. And yeah, what do you use? What do you use for that? It completely depends on the project and the needs. So I can't give any advice on what to use there, but you have to kind of figure out what that is and make a conscious decision on it. So yeah, how do we meet these needs of the users, of the clients? And I guess the third one is developers. We have developer experience needs, and we want to make sure it's not an absolute nightmare working on this project as well. So that plays a small part as well. But there's kind of four main areas that I want to kind of talk about: resilience, maintainability, performance, and security. I think with these, we can achieve a lot of those goals, but actually what these look like for software and for web are completely different. And then we get to software on the web and you get, again, a bit of a blend on all of them. Sometimes it's easier just to play board games, honestly, but actually a lot of this is about risk analysis and risk management, figuring out, okay, well, what are the risks in this project? What do I need to be wary of? And, how much security stuff do I need to put in? Is there security stuff I need to put in for a particular thing, maintainability stuff? Like, it's just reviewing what the risks are and applying, making sensible decisions around that. So diving into resilience then, in terms of software, what does that mean? Having a resilient UI workflow. Considering for when things go wrong, if there's error messages and things like that, making sure you consider that sort of stuff. I think I made this word up, but undoability, it's kind of that stuff I talked about earlier. Are they able to undo stuff they've done by accident or that sort of stuff as well? Can be really important to making sure something feels resilient. Resilient against multiple developers working on a project. Sometimes it's just one developer, sometimes there's a whole team working on it. So you want to make sure, things like are you using Git? Are you got dependencies and stuff in Composer or, equivalent if you've got a good local development setup that's kind of consistent. Reduce risk of bugs. I was tempted to put no bugs, but there's no such thing as software with no bugs. If you have software with no bugs, you're not worked hard enough. Reduce risk of bugs, and there's lots of things we can do for that. There's PHPSW unit for automated testing. You can then have manual testing as well, and we use test lodge for all of our manual testing stuff. QA processes, we have a technical QA, design QA, and a PM QA to kind of check behavior and stuff as well. So yes, there's a technical aspect of reducing bugs, but there's also lots of process stuff that you can do. Automated manual testing, multiple environments, so making sure you've got staging and production environments, that sort of thing as well. Sometimes multiple staging environments can be useful. CI/CD, so actually, being able to run a lot of this stuff on a server somewhere and, run automated tests. So you're not just relying on, one developer running, pests to make sure things work. That's running on a CI every time you do commits to make sure you master your main and your production branch are stable. Things like that as well as just doing little changes often to production. Zero downtime deployment, so making sure that when you do deploys, you're not just bringing the whole site down and that sort of stuff. So, and feature flags is worth a mention. So when you're releasing features, you might want to do staged rollouts to particular people, or just the client, that sort of stuff as well. So feature flags can be a really good way, especially on big systems, to help it feel a bit more resilient to the people using it. If you put something out and it breaks for everyone's going to feel it being less resilient. If it breaks for half the people because you use feature flags, that's slightly better. When I talk about CI/CD, this is just like, I thought I'd throw an example in. This is one of the pipelines we use on one of our software projects, that every time an MR gets raised, it'll go through this for every commit, where it's doing stuff with Composer, make sure Composer can build, linting a whole bunch of stuff, tests, security stuff, and like deployment is done all through here as well. So that's kind of an example of some of the stuff you can do with CI. So yeah, with resilience on the web now, so rather than kind of software side, what we're looking from the web, what does resilience mean? UI components need to look considered across all breakpoints. So that's just making it look like, when you're resizing your browser and you see something that looks a bit weird, making a conscious decision, go, actually, maybe we should just tweak this a little bit so it looks like someone's sat down and thought about it at every breakpoint. Editing content doesn't cause any issues. So, if they forgot to put a title in or some content, it doesn't throw errors and that sort of stuff as well, or having default images. Relying on declarative languages like HTML and CSS. This is actually from a book I'd highly recommend called Responsive Web Design by Jeremy Keith. And yeah, so what he kind of means there is like HTML and CSS, they're very kind of, error handling is really loose. If you forget to close a tag in HTML, your browser's going to be like, oh, I'm going to make a best guess here and still render something out. If you forgot some, misspell a property in CSS, it would be like, I'm just going to ignore that one thing. If you rely heavily on JavaScript is an imperative language. Really good because it gives you a lot of control. It's similar to PHP. You get a lot more control over what happens, but when things go wrong, it just dies. So building heavily on the web with JavaScript can make things less resilient because the language that you're using is less resilient. You have to work a lot harder to get that. Making sure it can work without JavaScript as an example. So there's lots of reasons why JavaScript could not load. It could be like, browser extensions could cause problems. It could be, you've got an error in your code. It could be, someone's on a train, that sort of stuff. Ad blockers. So following something called progressive enhancement is an approach on the web. You start with the core experience, and then you enhance that experience once you know you have JavaScript available, but still making sure, your website works and people can navigate around it using, various, whether it's, you can still like use the navigation and that sort of stuff. The amount of websites that go on, you turn JavaScript off and you can't even open the navigation. It's just a dead hamburger menu. At least show a list of the navigation items. Embrace unpredictability of the web and kind of being future friendly. The web is forever changing. We've got watches, and when those came out, people were like, oh, I'm going to maybe try and browse websites on my watch, or we've got VR stuff, and we don't know where the web is going and what device or equipment your website's going to be on. So by following kind of some of these principles, it can be easier to build. You can't be future resistant. You can't plan for the future that much, but you can be future friendly. And that's actually something that came from Brad Frost. He talked about this a lot. Accessibility is another big one as well that we have to think about. When we talk about accessibility, we're not just talking about making sure things are available to people with disabilities. Actually, disabilities can be permanent. For example, someone's got one arm, but they've got to be temporary or situational. So If someone has an arm injury, they broke their arm, that's the same as someone who's got one arm. You've got situational stuff, so like new parents, they could be holding a baby while trying to use their phone to complete tasks. So, same with seeing. It could be that someone's blind, it could be someone's lost their glasses, it could be, there's a lot of sun going on and they can't see stuff properly. So do you have enough contrast and stuff on your website? So kind of by building for, accessibility in mind, you help everyone, because every one of us could fall into these temporary situational stuff at any point, as well as permanent. So that's why, adding alt tags, that's why being able to navigate with keyboards and stuff is really useful. I don't know if anyone's got the magic mice from Apple and you have to turn over to plug them in. You'll be a keyboard user, because that's a situational one. So while you're waiting for that to charge, you're now a keyboard user and can only browse websites using the keyboard. But if you build that stuff in mind, then that could be a really resilient website that you've built. So I guess, based on that, what can we kind of infer through transferring knowledge from the software to the web? So we've done a lot of software stuff, and now we need to do some web stuff. What can we improve on our web side of things? Think about what our QA process is. Do we have, a design, development, and behavioral kind of QA processes that are needed? Are there any places where we need to add automated tests to our website? Can we use linters and tools to help catch bugs? Can we use Composer to declare dependencies and stuff? With WordPress you can, it's a bit of a pain, but it's doable. Can we improve deployment using CI/CD and things like that as well? So outside of just like a standard WordPress site or a typical website, it might be that you can do a bunch of these stuff when you need to. This is our kind of like, what I mean by our kind of like QA process. So when a merge request gets raised, we do all our pipeline stuff. Once that's passed, we do a PM QA, then make sure client expectations, what we've built matches client expectations. Then we do a technical QA and a design QA, and then we look at kind of merging that stuff in. And again, this is a pipeline that we use on our web. So a lot less, but it's still using some linting stuff. There's, this one I don't think has, this one doesn't have PHP unit on, but sometimes you use PHP unit for certain things as well, or PEST. We do deployment stuff as well. It's still useful for certain things. Then the other way around, if we do a lot of web stuff, what can we learn and improve from our software side? Are our UI components bulletproof? Have we considered them across all the different breakpoints? Do they look considered responsively? Is our front-end framework allowing us to build in a future-friendly way? Tailwind's very popular for software engineers to build, but it's not always super future-friendly. It needs to be a conscious thing to work towards. Are we expecting the unexpected in terms of devices and the way that things are going on the web? Have we considered things like network conditions, offline first, that sort of stuff as well can be really useful on the software side. I mean, typically software, you are relying on JavaScript a lot more, so it's hard to do all the progressive enhancement stuff, and that's often not needed because you're in a lot more of a controlled environment. So it's not, the risk isn't as strong there, but there's lots of other bits you can do. In terms of maintainability, making sure things are documented, consistent local environment for like Docker, we talked about that briefly as well. Having consistent coding style, linting, that sort of stuff, making it easy to kind of onboard developers. Following software engineering principles often helps. Solid, return early, composition over inheritance, that sort of stuff. Separation of concerns, that can mean a variety of things. But keeping your data out of your template files, that could mean separating business logic and stuff out. Automated tests and static analysis are often a great way to kind of help improve maintainability. Again, linking that to the client side of things as well. This helps kind of some of the cost efficiency over time. From the web side of things, componentization, things like design systems can be really powerful. Giving more power to editors as well, so they can do more, they can edit more, full site editing, page builders, that sort of stuff, so that you don't have to come back and just build templates all the time. They can kind of piece that together. Documentation, again, always helps. This is, when I say like a design system, this is an example of the ones that we use. So we have like all these like headings and stuff broken out. We've got all our components and organisms from everything in our page builder in here. And this is rendered without WordPress. This is just kind of front end. So diving in, what can we learn from going from software to web when we work on web stuff? can we make a consistent local environment? You'd be surprised, I've inherited a lot of web projects over the years, and they can be a bit of a pain, can be a bit of a mess. So yeah, can you make it easy to onboard other people? What coding style should we follow for PHP, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and stuff, linting? Can we put stuff in the CI? Can we follow some software engineering principles like MVC, or MCV apparently I typed. You can do that on WordPress as well. We've been doing MVC in WordPress for a long time, and it's so much better than the traditional WordPress stuff. Is there anything that will benefit from having automated tests? Now, typically on the web, you don't need to automate everything, test everything, but there might be certain aspects that we do, like some pagination stuff, some Stripe integrations or third-party CRM integrations we'll test, but not everything. From the software side, what can we learn from the web? Are we creating reusable UI components? Again, you might want a design system in some form to do that. Things like the storybook could be useful. Could we use a design system, to help document these? So I'm just noticing the time, so I'm going to zoom through a little bit, but feel free to stop me afterwards if you want me to go over anything else. In terms of performance, you want to make it feel fast. So things like this using kind of optimistic UI. So things like, on Instagram, when you press like, you get the animation immediately. In the background, it's doing an API call, and that comes back. If it's successful, you see nothing happens. If it's unsuccessful, it unhearts. But you can do tricks like that. You can use like skeleton loading screens where it shows what the UI would look like, and then does a little like gradient animation. Performance, when it comes to database, making sure that you're indexing stuff. Is that a bottleneck? Is the database you're using, like MySQL, is that the right thing? Could you have database queues to run stuff asynchronously or Redis or things like that as well? So you're not kind of blocking. You might need to think about horizontal scaling stuff here, running queries and stuff on dedicated servers and all that sort of stuff. So that's the typical like performance stuff that you're worrying about when you're thinking about software. On the web, it's a little bit different. You need to worry about optimizing images. There's a lot more imagery. The front-end assets you need to kind of be a lot stricter on. Caching is really important. You don't really cache on software. CDNs can really help because people are accessing it from all over the world. Bot spam protection. AI bots are terrible these days, and you often have 8 or 9 AI bots spamming your site, crawling it for training. So yeah, that's been a big thing the last 6 months or so. Lots of clients have been complaining about it. But you use Cloudflare and stuff to help protect that. PageSpeed Insights is another tool you can use to track and improve all the performance stuff on a website. So what are some of the things we can learn here? Do we have the right infrastructure for what we need on the web? Just worth reviewing and challenging that. Yes, you could use a $5 DigitalOcean box, but actually, is that doing what you need? Most of the time, probably yes. But are there any slow database queries that could be improved? Can we use optimistic UI or anything else to help it feel fast? And then going the other way, so software on the web, if we optimized the front end assets as much as we can, as our technical stack limited what we can optimize on the front end, I think that should be. This one should be web to software, sorry. Yeah, so sometimes if we're using just full JavaScript, all in and, Tailwind and stuff, there might be a limit to what we can optimize, but there might be some things we can do. There might be some images we can still optimize. But yeah, typically the performance differences are quite significant between the two. Security is another big one. There's not too many points on this one, but, preventing unauthorized user access is a massive thing when you've got software systems. Data breaches are really scary, really scary. So yeah, making sure that's covered, and you might be that you want to do encryption, especially if you've got tenants and that sort of stuff as well. You might even be that you need instant response plans and that sort of stuff in place when you're dealing with kind of that sort of data, protecting sensitive keys, making sure those again could be encrypted. Make sure they're not just in code or in Git unless they're encrypted in some form. Masking data and anonymizing data. So if you're working on a project and you've got a local version, you probably shouldn't have customer data in that database. It should just be seeded random data, or kind of when you're doing an export or whatever, it kind of scrambles and you don't actually get real user data. Could be a big one. Also, it helps prevent if you accidentally hit a button that sends out a mail to all your users, it's not going to do that to real people. You want that kind of environment a bit more controlled. protecting the APIs, authentication, that sort of stuff as well. Also protecting against, brute force attacks and user enumeration, that sort of stuff can be important. And penetration testing is often quite popular when you're doing security systems, because you have high risk of stuff for a lot of these things, so you want to make sure it's as secure as possible. On the web side of things, it's a little bit different. You want to, again, prevent unauthorized access, two-factor auth, single sign-on can be really useful. Content security policies, we can still have these on software, but we use them a lot more on the web. If you're not familiar with these are just kind of rules that you can put on the website that say, these are the list of scripts, styles, iframes, whatever, that are allowed to be loaded by the website. Anything else will just not load, will just error. It's a really good way of protecting XSS attacks and stuff. Making sure protecting SQL attacks, you've got forms that are a lot more kind of public on the web, so you want to make sure those are kind of protected against. Secure session management and stuff, so making sure that users, the session stuff is your cookies and stuff are secure, using kind of HTTP stuff, maybe they're encrypted, to prevent kind of hijacking stuff for sessions. And use your enumeration. So is it easy for someone to come in and run WP scan and go, actually these are all the users that are on the site, now I can just brute force. You want to kind of protect against that sort of stuff. So again, what can we learn when we're going from software to web? Actually, it might be useful if we are collecting, we've got a sign up form, we've got user information in the system, do we need an incident response plan with someone on the web? Are we keeping our secrets safe? Can it be encrypted? Often this is overlooked a lot on the web side of things, so it's important. Actually, you might want to do some penetration testing. How can we prevent local databases from containing customer data? So these are really useful things to think about when you're doing web stuff, especially as they have ones that have more of that software side of it. When going the other way, when you're doing more software stuff, what can we learn from web? Actually, sometimes you can add a CSP to a software project. We've done that a handful of times and it's really useful. It's a real pain. It's a real pain if anyone's done it, but it's useful. Are we preventing using enumeration again? Are our sessions secure? That sort of stuff. So those are kind of like the four main areas: security, resilience, maintainability, and security. I did say security. Those are kind of the four main areas that help us meet some of those needs and how they kind of differ from each thing. I have to mention SEO because it's the one main difference from kind of software to web, and actually is really hard to do well. So depending on kind of what you're building, if there's a heavy kind of SEO element that's important, it might be that you have to, do something that can do SEO really well, and then just suck up and figure out how to do the software engineering in that. Trying to do it in Laravel, you can do all the software engineering stuff really well, but actually doing the SEO stuff can be really hard, and it's just, lots of trade-offs. That said, there are lots of tools, Satamic, October CMS, that kind of bridge this gap a little bit, and for projects that kind of sit in between here, there are options. Lumberjack is our MVC WordPress framework that we use. It's heavily inspired by Laravel, so we've got containers and routing and stuff in there. Same with Sage, it's very popular kind of MVC WordPress theme as well. So these kind of allow you to do more software engineering, but using WordPress up to a point, and these ones let you do more software engineering, but still do your CMS side of things. Because trying to manage content as well as WordPress on Laravel is really hard, and is often just not as usable. So just wrapping up then, the client needs might be slightly different. They're both hard to do well. Like I said, I've done both for a while, and the stuff that you're building and the things you need to think about are completely different, but there are overlaps and stuff we can improve if we understand what's different about them both. We can make a conscious decision about the tooling that you're using, and if it's impacting any of these user needs. It's often easy to kind of fall into the trap of what I'm comfortable doing as a developer and just kind of what we've always done, but actually zooming out and going, hey, if this particular project, the particular needs, what are they, what tooling is actually best here, not just using what's comfortable. Are you serving the user's needs and the client's needs over yours? Again, not always applicable depending on what you're building. You know, if it's just trying to get a quick SaaS thing up, sometimes your developer needs to get that thing out is more important, but something to think about. What can you apply to your projects? Again, this is not an exhaustive list of things. Some of it might be useful, might trigger thoughts or other areas that you can investigate. But yeah, that's kind of a quick overview. It's mostly just kind of a high level. Here's some differences. Here are some similarities, some things to think about, and yeah, hopefully kind of get you start thinking about how you can improve your own projects, whether you're doing web or software, transitioning into web from software or software from web. Yeah, I guess, do we have any questions or anything you want me to kind of dive into a bit more? I went quite fast through some of that sort of stuff, but yeah, happy to dive into anything else.
In security, you mentioned user enumeration.
Yes. So that's a way, you know, as a hacker, I want to see how many users are in the system, because if I know email addresses or usernames, it's easy to brute force. So, you know, it could be that on WordPress, for example, you've left the author pages on. So someone could hit the sitemap and see, okay, there's these users, and now I know it's much easier for me to now brute force those user passwords. Whereas if you hide all that stuff away, and there's no way for them to know what users are on your site or on your system. Another kind of popular thing is, or common thing in sort of the Laravel world, is when you log in with a invalid, you know, username and password, it will say, sorry, this username doesn't exist. But then if you get a username that does exist, but the wrong password, it will say, sorry, your password's wrong. So I think Laravel defaults to that against a lot of recommendation from the security world, because that could be a way that you leak valid usernames to the world of, people who try and hack your site. So that's kind of what I mean by that user enumeration stuff.
Where do you think monitoring fits into all of this?
Monitoring? Yeah, I think that comes down to, I guess, resilience as well. If you're monitoring stuff, I guess from a security perspective as well, it can be useful. So a lot of our CI/CD stuff, we have a bunch of it that runs nightly as well, to kind of make sure everything continues to work. It could be tracking CPU usage or things like that as well to make sure stuff doesn't go down. I think a lot of that ties into making things feel resilient. And again, how much monitoring you do depends on how critical things are and what the kind of the risks are, I guess. You probably need a bit less monitoring on the web than you do on software historically. But yeah, you can monitor. There's, I don't know if anyone's heard of Grafana. It's great for that sort of monitoring stuff, especially from an infrastructure level. We use that a handful of times, but yeah, it can be really powerful to prevent things from happening, as long as you've got decent monitoring and stuff on, and then processes in place to action those. Definitely. Does that help?
Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts on using like software, so like having a Laravel and WordPress side by side?
Yeah, absolutely. We've recommend that a lot for like WordPress being the content piece, and then it can use the Laravel API, for example, to pull the product information out. So the toilet training site that we built a while ago, that was Laravel and WordPress. So WordPress was doing all the website stuff, but any product stuff, placing orders, that sort of stuff, it was using the API to handle all that. So all the complex business logic was separated. And one of the projects we're working on at the moment actually is they already have like a booking system and other developers built and worked on. That's, I think, in Laravel or Symfony. But their current website had a bunch of Xero integration for invoicing and Stripe integration. And we're working with them at the moment to move that into the booking system so the website can be more about content, and then use an API to get that, rather than, at the moment their user logs into WordPress and when they set a user up, they have to add them to the booking system and the website. And it's like, actually, let's just move that into, the place where it makes sense for the data to live, because you don't want that data to be in WordPress. It's easier to make the Laravel stuff a bit more secure. And again, with data breaches and things like that as well, having that data in one place is generally a lot better than it being kind of fragmented. Also from GDPR as well, if you've got customer data, you need to worry about GDPR and where it's going to get removed from if people ask for their information to be removed. So yeah, having that in one place, especially with joining software and web, can be really useful. We've done that a bunch. Again, it kind of depends on what you're doing. But yeah, it can be really useful.
What does that process look like generally? Like if you, for a new project, how do you decide where on the software web spectrum that sits?
Yeah, that's a good question. We tend to do a lot of discovery with the clients. We work out kind of what their needs are, what they're trying to achieve, and figure out what sort of content and stuff there is. On a recent project, I went through and screenshotted like all of their existing stuff that they have on their like current workflow because we were looking at rebuilding it. And I was like, okay, well, what's going to be coming from WordPress here? What's content and what could be coming from their booking system, for example? And I went and just mapped all of that. And then I got actually called tomorrow morning to go through all that with them. And we work out, okay, actually this is WordPress content stuff. Actually, let's move this into the booking system. Yeah, a lot of it's just kind of figuring out what's useful for that project. And sometimes it has to be kind of a Laravel thing. Sometimes it has to be a WordPress thing. It kind of depends, I guess, but doing that kind of just discovery piece and identifying what data it is that you need and where that could come from. And if it's lots of content stuff that you've identified and there's a lot of editing stuff, okay, well, that's going to be a pain in Laravel, but actually there's all of this software engineering stuff that actually outweighs us having to do some content stuff. I guess the other aspect of that is time. WordPress is really easy, especially with advanced custom fields, to spin up and make content really editable really quickly. Actually, if you were to then build that in Laravel, you're going to spend a lot of time building that CMS for them. So yeah, it can be really tricky sometimes finding that balance, but figuring that out early, wireframing, data mapping, that sort of stuff can help. And just conversations with the client. It helps if they're technical, but yeah, sometimes it's just looking at what the needs are and going, this is what we propose and this is why. It tends to work well.
Have you ever built any desktop applications using PHP?
I've seen that you can. No, we've not done loads of kind of desktop application stuff, other than just playing around with some local development stuff. So we have a wrap around Docker, for example, for our local dev stuff. So our software engineers love and know how to use Docker really well. Our web team, it's, we used to use Ballet and stuff for Laravel and MAMP, that sort of stuff is traditionally what web people are more familiar with. But actually, if a software engineer can put a small wrapper around Docker and make it easy to use for devs, so that we can just run, we call it Volker, we can just do a Volker rub. It just does everything and it's got the config and stuff saved. So we're looking at building a desktop application for that as well. But yeah, we've not done much kind of desktop application stuff. How that kind of fits in with this sort of stuff, I'd imagine is that kind of software on the web mentality, I would say. It probably follows that a lot more. You need kind of that consistent UI, but you've also probably got more business logic in there. Yeah, I guess you've got some control over users. It's the same with apps, I guess, similar to apps. We do a lot of app stuff, and yeah, you've got a lot more control over what devices are being used. But yeah, outside of that, it's still kind of very webby. That's my kind of general thoughts on it. Cool. Everything?
Yes, well done. Thank you very much.